Welcome, everyone. Take a moment to settle into a comfortable position. We can begin tonight with a meditation, as we always do. A quiet mind is a good mind to hear the Dharma with. Take a moment to check in and see how this body-mind is showing up in the world in this moment. What's going on? What's going on in the mind? What's going on in the body? Is it pleasant, unpleasant? Your thoughts about a particular thing? Your emotions? How is the energy in the body moving? Just checking in, just seeing what's there. You might let attention move to the breath as it moves through the body. Letting the whole breath arise and pass away in experience. From the tip of the nose to the bottom of the belly. Just letting the mind be this gentle reception. You doesn't need to force the breath to be any particular way. The breath is just arising as it is. The task is simply to know. It's a very gentle thing. Just be present. As we sit here, the only thing that needs to be done is to be present. Just let the breath arise and pass away. Everything else can fall away. All the worries and cares that are very important to you throughout the day can be set aside for this period of time. Just give yourself that gift of presence, stillness, not needing anything to be different than it is. Just be here with the breath. We like to think of ourselves as rational, logical, capable people. We like to think that our mind should do exactly as we tell it and nothing else. Isn't often the case. When we ask the mind to do something, sometimes it will go off and do its own thing. Eventually it will come back. Sometimes the tendency is to treat the mind with judgment and condemnation when that happens. That's not necessary. Minds are going to do that sort of thing anyway. Just treat the mind with kindness. Like this little puppy that's gotten lost and come back home. You don't say mean things to the puppy. You just pet it and give it a treat. And welcome it back home. That's the thing to do with the mind when it wanders. Just be kind to it. And then come back to the breath. You might notice the attitude you have towards meditation in this moment. You might see if it can soften, can be even more gentle. Sometimes meditation gets very hard and very focused, very goal-oriented. It's not always bad, but it can be very soft and very gentle too. And it might be as your attitude towards meditation relaxes, bring more gentleness into experience. You might check and see if the breath itself has changed. Perhaps it seems to flow a bit easier. It's become softer, more ephemeral. Maybe even the body has felt this way too. You might check and see if it's become more pleasant. Perhaps there's a kind of enjoyable feeling going to the breath or the body. It's not always the case. It's okay if it's not this way. But you might look and see if there's any of that there. If there's any pleasant feelings or perhaps pleasant emotional feelings like happiness, you might let them be part of the meditation as well. Let attention know those feelings as they arise and change and pass away. And if you have noticed any pleasant feelings, the tendency might be to hold on to them or try and get them to grow or increase. And that's not necessary. You just hold them with the same attention you give the breath. Just receive, just notice, and appreciate the gift. And if you're enjoying having the attention receive the breath, you can continue on with that. If you like, let attention shift entirely to any pleasant feelings you're experiencing. Either one is fine. Whatever feels good to you. And in this last minute or so, you might take a moment to appreciate the benefit of our practice today. How has this changed our life for the better, even in a very small way? We might also take a moment to appreciate that whatever benefit has accrued to us by our practice here today will spread to others, those we care about, to our friends, to our coworkers, people we don't even know. Hmm. Well, thank you all for coming. Hi, Rev. I get to say hello earlier. We have a couple of announcements. So coming up in just a few weeks, starting August 16th, there's a retreat weekend hosted by the Red Clay Sangha. October 1st, Dhamma is going to start an online course about the introduction to Buddhism. On October 5th, there's going to be the autumn gathering, and it'll be here at the vihara. All this can be found on the website, dassanaya.org. The Buddha has a semi-famous quote, all I teach is suffering and the end of suffering. It's a good quote. It's good because it's pithy, like many of the Buddha's sayings, but it's also good because it's true. Suffering and the end of suffering is what the Dhamma is about. The Dhamma tells us what suffering is, why and how it occurs, and it gives us any number of techniques and frameworks that we can use to live our life in a way that we suffer less and ultimately don't suffer at all. And the word I used in that quote, suffering, is an English word. And of course, the Buddha wouldn't have used that word because he didn't speak English. And I understand it's kind of up for debate what language the Buddha did speak, but the words that we have, the kind of earliest recordings of what he said are in Pali. And so the Pali word that I was substituting suffering for is dukkha. And dukkha has two parts, du and ka. And du has the connotation of like unpleasant or kind of ill-fitting or doesn't work quite well. So it's kind of a negative connotation. And ka has the literal meaning of whole or empty space, but in the context of dukkha, this word, I understand it to be a reference to if you have a cart, the cart has a wheel and an axle and some wheels. The ka, the empty space, is the hole in the wheel where the axle sits. And so dukkha is like a kind of the hole where the axle fits. It's like ill-fitting. And there's two ways we can understand this analogy. So the first is that if the hole is this shape and the axle is some other shape, there's room for like stuff to get stuck in the hole. You can think of like grease or dirt or bugs or grass. And so this is kind of like kind of unpleasant space in that sense. But it's also unpleasant to that if the hole doesn't match the axle, the person riding on the cart is not going to have a very good time. It's going to be like very bumpy, and they're going to get kind of jounced around all over the place. So there's these two meanings to that analogy, or two understandings of that analogy, and there's two meanings of the word dukkha, and in my mind, you can kind of mirror them to the two ways you can understand the analogy. So the first understanding of dukkha is like maybe I would call it dukkha nature. So an example is like when I get a dry mouth, I drink some of this water. But at some point, I'm going to get a dry mouth again, right? This water does not quench my thirst in a lasting manner. So this water has dukkha nature. It's not capable of providing lasting satisfaction. So it's unpleasant in that way. And so it's something intrinsic to the object, kind of like the hole is full of grease and bugs and sticks and rocks and whatever. It's kind of intrinsic. The unpleasantness is kind of intrinsic to that space. The other meaning of dukkha is maybe one that we're maybe a little more familiar with. It's the felt dukkha. It's the dukkha that we can feel. The world is this way, and we often want it to be this way, this different thing. Dukkha is the difference between the two. It's the dissonance. It's that felt discomfort from from wanting the world to be other than the way it is. A word that gets used for this sometimes is resistance, like a resistance to the present moment. Sometimes things arise and we don't like them, so we kind of want to try and push them away. Sometimes other things arise that we do like them, we don't want them to go away. We hold on to them. We resist the world as it is. Other words that I use for myself are like friction or blockage in the flow of experience, or sometimes I think of it in terms of like if you've got a mechanical system, it's like slippage in the gears. So this is dukkha. And that's kind of analogous to the dukkha that you get from being the person on the cart with the ill-fitting axle. It's the bumpy ride. It's the dukkha that's kind of derives from the intrinsic dukkha nature of the world. And so what I want to talk about tonight is the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths are pretty much about dukkha, which is why I went through the etymology of the word. So some of my talks are more amenable to bullet points than others. This is a very bullet point friendly talk. So if you like to follow along in that way, for each of the truths, I'll give the truth in my own words. I will explain how it's often misunderstood, and I'll talk about what the Buddha said about how to how to relate to that truth. The first noble truth, in my words, is that nothing in experience is capable of providing lasting satisfaction. So just as this water has dukkha nature, it can't satisfy my thirst. Everything that arises in experience has that nature to it. There's no object or feeling or experience or relationship or anything of that nature that can provide a lasting source of happiness. And the way this is often misunderstood, it's often kind of mistranslated. It's sometimes it gets read as like life is suffering, which is not true. The first noble truth doesn't mean that things aren't ever good. Like we can contradict that with our direct experience. We have experience of feelings of happiness or pleasantness or things like that. But what it does mean is that even those pleasant things, even no matter how pleasant it gets, it can't provide lasting satisfaction. And that's because it always goes away. It's because everything is impermanent. So the first noble truth comes from the fact that everything in the world is impermanent. Because it's always arising and passing away, nothing that comes from it can last. And what the Buddha said about this truth, this is from the Dhamma Shaka Pavattana Sutta, the Setting the Wheel of the Dhamma in Motion Sutta. He says, this noble truth of dukkha is to be comprehended. So it's to be known, it's just to be understood. I think because when this is known, when you see the world as fully impermanent and fully incapable of providing lasting satisfaction, you see the futility of what the mind does in grasping for satisfaction and experience, which is what it spends most of its time doing. It doesn't work because everything is impermanent, and seeing that gives you impetus to stop this kind of futile behavior of the mind. And so we come to the second noble truth. In my words, that's tanha, conditions, dukkha. So tanha is another Pali word that means, it's usually translated as craving, but I think the literal meaning is better here. The literal meaning is thirst. And so the maybe helpful analogy I have in my mind is, like I like to go hiking, and when I go hiking, I don't generally take anything with me. So if it's been a long hike and I haven't had any water, I might come back, quite thirsty. And I've had the experience of being like very, very thirsty on the last portion of the hike. And if you've had that experience, you know that the mind gets, I guess the way to say it would be like monomaniacal about that thirst. That's all it's going to think about when you get thirsty enough. It's it spends its time daydreaming about that big jug of water that you're going to get and chug down, or like, beating yourself up for not bringing water, or just like stuck on the sensations. But it's stuck on that one thing, and I think that gives a good flavor for tanha, for how we see the world, for how we're stuck on this idea of wanting the world to be different. Because if you look at what we do, that's what we spend most of our time doing. And the other thing that comes to mind when I think of tanha is the hungry ghosts, which are these figures in Buddhism, and I think also like Indian cultures and Chinese cultures as well. But there's these figures in Buddhism that have this like great hunger, and they're depicted with these like giant bellies to like, show the great hunger, and like very small mouths. So no matter how much they can eat, they can never satisfy their hunger. I think that's a good way to understand tanha too. This kind of unquenchable thirst. I think the misunderstanding here. I think the truth of this, the truth of that in general is graspable in maybe like the big picture sense. I think probably everybody has some experience of, like really wanting a promotion or something, and the boss gives it to another person, and looking at that and seeing that wanting, and seeing the hurt involved in that. And so I think the second noble truth is understandable to most folks in that sense, but I think the misunderstanding is just not seeing just how deep this goes. Like craving does not just live up at that level. It goes all the way down. Going back to the first noble truth, where we understand that because this world is impermanent, it's not capable of providing lasting satisfaction. The mind really does not like that. It really does not like that. It spends, it does this process called sanya. I know I've talked about this before, but I think it's probably been a while. Sanya is the idea that, the mind takes parts of the flow of experience and draws a box around them and says, this is a solid thing. I'm going to understand this as one kind of stable thing that doesn't change. When in reality, as we know, everything is always changing. So I guess to give an example, like right here, what's happening in the direct flow of experience is that there are this kind of set of fields of color that are like moving and changing. There's this kind of sort of pulsating sensation in the fingers. It's kind of radiating and moving around. What Sanya is the mind taking all that information and drawing a box around it and saying, this is a glass. And a glass, when you're kind of living in that world, is a thing that doesn't appear to change. But this is a form of tanha. This is a form of craving. It's a craving for the sort of security and safety that comes with feeling like you know the world and understand it, feeling like you're able to kind of move around it, move around in it in an intelligible way. And it's like we're doing this all the time, all the time. It goes even deeper than that. Even the idea of having experience at all, like that is a craving too. That is a craving for existence. So it goes all the way down. The Buddha says about this. This is from the same sutta. This noble truth of the origination of dukkha is to be abandoned. And he's not saying to kind of abandon the knowledge. He's saying to, this is a truth of how we live in the world. We do this craving thing all the time. And this craving leads to dukkha. That's what's to be let go of. That's what's to be abandoned. Abandoning that pattern, which takes us to the third noble truth. I would speak it as with the removal of tanha as a condition. So tanha conditions dukkha in the second noble truth. With the removal of tanha as a condition, dukkha ceases. So the image that I have in my mind is of a Jenga tower. I don't know if you've ever played that game, but it's a game where you stack a bunch of wooden blocks, and at the end of the game, you have these kind of like very precarious towers where if you pull out one single block, the whole tower comes crashing down. So in this analogy, this tower of blocks is whatever dukkha you're kind of facing in that moment, and all the blocks are different conditions of dukkha, and one of them is tanha, craving. And so if you remove that craving, the tower just comes tumbling down, and there's no more dukkha for that particular thing. And I think this is, for me at least, this is the pivotal part of the Four Noble Truths. Like this point here, because the third noble truth is, all the noble truths are always true, but the third noble truth is always true. So in this moment, or in each moment, this conditionality of dukkha is true. So in this moment, you have two paths ahead of you. On one path, you can leave that block in, leave that tanha there, and have craving. And this will condition dukkha, and this will condition further dukkha. And on the other path, you can pull that block out, and there's no tanha, and the tower comes crumbling down. There's no dukkha, and there's no conditioning of further dukkha. And this choice is always there. It's there in every moment. And for me, the simplicity of this is just so powerful. Much of the dukkha that we wrestle with is caught up in these big stories about who we are and how the world should be. And some of them stretch all the way back to childhood, and there's so much baggage around them. And when you interact with them at the level of story, it can often be really hard to step out from some of that baggage. But if you're just looking at it in the present moment, you're not dealing with the story. It's just a choice between dukkha or not dukkha. And that's very simple. And that simplicity was very appealing to me. And I practiced like just at that point for a number of years. There's benefits and detriments to practicing that way, but it was very helpful for me. Right? I think the way that people misunderstand the third noble truth is in thinking that there are exceptions to this rule. The mind is so good at finding a way to crave. It's very good at just getting around any kind of rationalization or technique that you're trying to do. I'm quite certain you've all had the experience of dealing with some particularly sticky strain of dukkha, and doing your techniques or doing whatever you're doing, and finally feeling like you've got on top with it, you've got on top of it, and you're just there, you're just letting it be present. And that lasts for like 1/10 of a second, and the mind says, "Yeah, but," and then the cycle starts again. And I know you've had that experience. I'm very familiar with this. Sometimes I think of it like a water balloon. Like if you've got the water balloon in your hand, and the water is right here, and you squeeze the water balloon, it comes out the side. It's not there anymore. The mind is very good at doing that. And it's also a very understandable misunderstanding, because like just so much of the messaging from the world is counter to that. It's telling you that you need to change things, and you need to it's just counter to this. So what the Buddha said about this truth is that the noble truth of the cessation of dukkha is to be directly experienced. And this too is a really important point. So like the first noble truth was just something to be comprehended, but this is something you need to see directly. You need to see clearly. And the way I understand this is that the part of the mind that deals with craving is a very kind of primitive and fundamental part of the mind. Like it doesn't live up here in the words and thoughts. It's something below. So it's not really amenable to logic. Like you can't logic your way out of craving. Even if I've completely convinced you of the like how dukkha works, it's not enough. You need to see it clearly. Like this primitive part of the mind, I think of it like training a dog. Like if you want to get a dog to do something, you give it a treat, you give it something pleasant. And what seeing this third noble truth is like you see the tanha go away, and you see the dukkha go away, and that's pleasant. That's the treat. That's the good feeling. It feels really nice to let go of that suffering. Which kind of brings us to the fourth noble truth. So the fourth noble truth is that the Eightfold Path is the way that this tendency we have towards tanha goes away. So it's one thing to talk about, sitting there in the present moment and choosing suffering or not suffering, but this craving thing we have, it's a pattern. It's something we've the mind is a creature of habit. We've done this habit millions and millions of times. So we need to see that that pleasantness from the dukkha going away. We need to see that many times. We need to practice that. This is exactly what the Buddha said. He said the noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of dukkha is to be developed, is to be practiced. So I'm sure you all have understood or heard the Eightfold Path, but just to go over it again, we have right view, which is maybe actually I'll use a different translation. So the steps of the Eightfold Path are often translated as like right view, right intention, etc. Sometimes wise view, wise intention, etc. There's another translation I like too. It's harmonious. So harmonious view, harmonious intention, etc. And I feel like this speaks to the like. So there's dukkha, which is a very non-harmonious way of living. It's this kind of ill-fitting axle that kind of bounces you around all the time, and your life is kind of discomfortable in that way. But harmonious, like using harmonious view, I think maybe it gets to kind of the Eightfold Path being the opposite of this life of dukkha. So there's harmonious view, so we can kind of see clearly where we're headed. Harmonious intention, resolving to follow the Dharma. Harmonious speech, so not causing harm with our words. harmonious action, not causing harm with our actions, harmonious livelihood, so not causing harm with our job or how we live our life in a kind of day-to-day way, harmonious effort, which is the middle path or the four great efforts, harmonious mindfulness, being aware of the mind and body and having some discernment about what we do, and harmonious concentration, which is basically sitting practice. I think the misunderstanding for this last noble truth is mostly not putting as much importance on it as might be helpful, and that's completely understandable too, because this suffering that we live, it's pervasive. This dukkha that we're living is pervasive, and so it's hard to see like what the benefit of not having it is if we don't know exactly how it's affecting us. It's the kind of fish in water issue. Yeah. So that's the Four Noble Truths. Nothing that arises and passes away is capable of providing lasting satisfaction. The tanha conditions dukkha, and when that tanha is removed, dukkha goes away as well. And the Eightfold Path, or practicing the Dhamma, is the way that we kind of train this muscle of letting go of craving. I think the last thing I'll offer is that it's something I touched on when I was talking about Third Noble Truth. I think a misconception many people have about practice, including myself for a while, is that what's offered at the end of the path, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, is kind of like maximum happiness. Like you just turn up the dial to 11 and sit there for the rest of your life. But that's not what's on offer. And I'm reminded of my first week-long retreat. Often what happens on retreat is there's a lot of emotional stuff coming up. And so sometimes pleasant and sometimes very unpleasant, and usually a mix of both. But I remember my first week-long retreat just being just completely pleasant. I don't think I've ever had that experience afterwards, but this was a very lovely experience, and it was very helpful in that I just definitely decided I was going to do this retreat thing again, but it gave me the wrong impression. It gave me the idea that that was what awaited me at the end of the path, just like that all the time. But it's not the case. What happens when dukkha ceases is just there's peace. It's just a lack of resistance to the world. We're constantly at war with the world. That can stop. It can just stop. And that setting down the idea that the world needs to be different is this great burden off your shoulders, and you do get a lot of happiness and pleasant feelings that come along with that, but peace is really the thing that you end up wanting in the end. Like, happiness is very nice, but it feels better just not to be pulled around. That's what I have to offer. It's very good to see you all.